Today we're going to explore the difference between invocation and evocation, two central techniques in ceremonial magic and spiritual practice. Though they may seem similar at first glance, both involve calling upon spiritual entities or constructs. Their intent, method, and outcomes are, however, quite different. So let's first begin by defining these terms and dive into their historical roots, ritual applications, and philosophical implications. The words that we use themselves come from Latin. Invocation comes from invocare, meaning to call in or to call upon, whereas evocation comes from evocare, meaning to call forth or to call out. In practice, invocation is about drawing a spiritual force into yourself, inviting it to inhabit or overshadow you, whereas evocation is about calling a spirit to appear outside of you in a defined space, and in most circumstances, such as in the Goetia, this is done under controlled circumstances. As Aleister Crowley succinctly puts it, to invoke is to call in, just as to evoke is to call forth. Thus, in invocation, the macrocosm floods the consciousness. In evocation, the magician, having become the macrocosm, creates a microcosm. Put another way, invocation is a vertical mystical act seeking union. Evocation is horizontal, aimed at command or cooperation. Invocation is found in many spiritual traditions, from Tantra to pagan rites, as well as the Christian liturgy. In ceremonial magic, invocation is used to call deities, angels, or archetypal forces into the self, sometimes for blessing, sometimes for transformation, sometimes to speak or act through the magician. In Kabbalah, this would be sometimes referred to as ibur. Drawing the lesser invoking ritual and the pentagram in Hermetic Kabbalah, a method for drawing elemental energies into the ritual space and self. A dramatic example of invocation is found in the Bornless ritual, which comes from the Greek magical papyri, which begins, "I am the headless one who makes the lightning flash and the thunder roll." This is a theurgic invocation meant to identify the magician with divine power. Crowley again adapts this in the Liber Samech, a ritual to invoke the holy guardian angel. In Wicca and modern paganism, invocation may take a gentler form. "I invoke thee, O bright mother, come into me and be with me in these works." In these settings, invocation is not domination, but hospitality, a merging of wills for sacred purpose. Invocation requires receptivity, purity of intent, and often deep emotional engagement. It is as much about surrender as it is about calling. Evocation, by contrast, often appears in ritual magic, especially grimoires like the Clavicula Solomonis, the Key of Solomon, the Goetia, and of course the Book of Abramelin. Here the magician stands in a protected circle and calls spirits to appear in a triangle or vessel, using names of power, symbols, and constraint. As the Goetia says, the spirits are to be constrained to appear in a triangle, that they may not afflict the exorcist. This tone of evocation is often more commanding, even judicial. The magician uses divine authority to compel or persuade spirits to appear and cooperate. And in this, Goetia magic resembles a little bit fundamentalist charismatic Christianity, where things are invoked in the name of a particular saviour. But evocation is not merely about domination. In the words of Franz Baden, a 20th century hermeticist, the magician must learn the language of the beings he invokes and their hierarchy. It is not brute force, but harmony with their sphere that brings success. While Hollywood might show evocation as summoning demons for deals, in reality it's a discipline art, requiring, firstly, a solid cosmology, secondly, spiritual authority, thirdly, clear boundaries, and fourthly, ethical intent. Evocation can be used for knowledge, healing, protection, or psychological integration when approached with respect. When we look at the psychological and archetypal interpretations, modern thinkers have also reinterpreted invocation and evocation psychologically. In Jungian terms, as the psychologist James Hillman wrote, invocation could be seen as integration of archetypes, letting a part of the unconscious self arise into awareness, whilst evocation might reflect objectification, externalizing psychic forces so that they can be dialogued with understanding and transformed. As he said in his 1975 essay Revisioning Psychology, we can no longer speak of the gods as residing in Olympus. They have become our complexes, our inner figures. In this view, calling a spirit is a way of engaging with powerful aspects of the psyche, whether as protector, challenger, or teacher. This aligns with techniques like active imagination, but also ritual framing, using symbols, names, and space to lend weight and clarity. Thus, invocation and evocation are not just metaphysical acts. They are psychological tools for transformation and integration. Both practices carry risks, not because spirits are evil per se, but because the forces they tap into are intense, liminal, and can destabilize the ego. As Dion Fortune wrote in Mystical Kabbalah in 1935, magic is the art of causing changes in consciousness at will. But unless the will is trained and the consciousness prepared, the change may be chaotic. This can be seen in some of the more extended spiritual practices. A notable example of this would be in the Eastern tradition, the Retreat of Threes, whereby for 3 years, 3 months, 3 days, you engage in intense spiritual practice. Likewise, in the ritual of Abramelin, less so with the 6-month ritual that comes from the French translation, or the 18-month from the more fuller German edition. A large part of the retreat is not the ritual itself, it is spiritual purification, spiritual practice. And the ritual itself is really only 7 days long, but it's the preparation that is important. In the Greek magical papyrus, though it does not discuss these types of preparation, the people who usually practiced this historically were usually serving priests in the temples, whether Egyptian or the Serapeum or in the Greek mystery shrines. They already had an established spiritual practice conducted over a long period of time. Thus, they were already prepared for the encounter. We who live in more pedestrian times may need, in preparation for either of these practices, to set aside a period of preparation. And this is reflected in the Goetia and, of course, in the Clavicula Solomonis, the Key of Solomon, where there is a period of preparation before you do the rituals, where you ritually purify and prepare yourself, getting yourself into this frame of mind so that the change, as Dion Fortune says, is not so chaotic. So whether you're invoking a divine force or evoking a spirit into space, you are engaging with sacred otherness that demands grounding, ethical clarity, and this is important, humility. You should always ask yourself, why am I calling? What am I prepared to give? And what structures do I have to handle the outcome? So, to summarize, invocation is calling a divine or spiritual force into yourself for communion, transformation, or blessing. Evocation is calling a spirit or entity outside of yourself for dialogue, cooperation, and manifestation. Invocation unites, evocation prepares and engages. Both require preparation, purpose, and respect. As the magician Don Lilo Desquet puts it, magic is not about commanding spirits. It's about making friends in high places. I truly recommend you do read his book, Low Magic. It's all in your head. You just have no idea how big your head is. So whether you invoke or evoke, whether you command or dialogue, may your practice deepen your connection to the mystery. And, more importantly, strengthen your responsibility in the world and to yourself. I am Dr. Shimon de Valencia, but I am also a merry mystic. May you find communion and mystery in your spiritual journey. And may the connections you make, whether through invocation or evocation, deepen your practice. Namaste.